So welcome to Scotland's Digital Science Festival. It's really nice to see people from all over the country joining us. And I'd like to say welcome to Vivienne Ming, who is joining us from Copenhagen this evening. Making it a truly international event, which we're always grateful for. We know how busy you are, so we really do appreciate it. So I'm just going to do a slight quick introduction. So Vivienne is a prominent American theoretical neuroscientist, technologist, and entrepreneur. She is known for her work in artificial intelligence, neuroprosthetics, and human potential. So Vivienne co-founded SOCOS Labs, which is an independent think tank exploring the future of human potential, where she invents and applies AI systems to augment and enhance human capabilities. Vivienne has also been recognised for her advocacy in LGBTQ plus rights and has been named one of the 10 women to watch in tech by Inc. magazine, and also one of the BBC Top 100 Women in 2017. And you have featured in numerous newspapers. It's always really good to talk to someone when I have to do these introductions that someone's got so much profile online. So I really do appreciate that. So I know, Vivienne, you've also held numerous positions at academic institutions, including the University of California, Berkeley, and Stanford. And you are a frequent speaker at conferences. You just said that you've been speaking at the UN, and now very, very kindly joining us at TechFest with Scotland's Digital Science Festival. So nobody wants to listen to me. So Vivienne, if I can hand over to you. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's lovely to join you all from slightly chilly Copenhagen, which is it's a cozy place to be. I'm going to be honest. I enjoyed it more than Rome, where I spoke for the UN, only because there are not nearly so many tourists here. And having grown up in a tourist town myself, I think I like the coziness of Copenhagen. Not as much as I would like to be in Scotland, but Copenhagen is the home to Novo Nordisk, and tomorrow I'm talking at their AI day and hearing all the things they're working on in the AI space. Actually, I have some new affiliations. For example, I'm now an honorary professor at University College London and will be there the first week of December to give a talk there, as well as be on a panel for the Oxford International Speaker Series, jointly with Oxford and Cambridge and UCL down in London. So if any of you are in the London area, come out, I think, on the 7th and have some fun with us talking, I suspect, about AI, but I also suspect I'll find out the day of, because I give a lot of talks and sometimes I lose track of them. So down in Rome with the UN and the World Bank and many others, I was talking about the neuroscience of trust. What goes on inside our brains, what happens when dopamine is released and your nucleus accumbens gets involved in your processing of people that are different than you. Tonight, with you all, I'm going to talk a bit more broadly and less technically about an upcoming book of mine, which will be out next year, and some of the core themes that are in it. And it goes by the title of How to Robot-Proof Your Kids, which isn't simply meant to convey what the book is about, which in fact covers a huge range of topics, but rather is specifically a question that was asked of me when many, many years ago, I was invited to Washington, D.C. to visit the U.S. Department of Education, and they asked me that very specific question: Dr. Ming, how do we robot-proof our kids? And I gave the answers that I felt I had to offer at the time, and they said, yeah. But we have this 6-week job retraining program. Do you think you could help us with that? Is there just like one magic skill we could teach everyone, every kid, every adult, former coal miners and bus drivers, that would magically make them ready for this coming future, which we presume will be full of artificial intelligence? And to be clear, this was long before large language models like GPT or Gemini were out in the world. And so in that sense, they were really trying to, I think, get ahead of this problem. But unfortunately, they weren't thinking big enough because there is no magic skill. There is, in fact, no skill that we might traditionally think of, which is robot proof. Not factorizing a polynomial or knowing how to program or refining your AI skills or any of that. There have been a decade of policy papers from 10 Downing Street to the White House, from the UN to the World Economic Forum, McKinsey, BCG. I will say with great arrogance, they're all wrong because they all imagine somehow there would be some unique, amazing, hard skill that if we just taught every kid everywhere in the world, they would be prepared. What I want to take, I don't know, about 30 to 40 minutes to walk through is not simply why that's wrong. I don't want this to just be a doom and gloom talk because it's not. After I take a little time to explain why this isn't where we should be focused, we're then going to go in what we can do about it. Whether you are a parent thinking about your own children or a teacher, or you're thinking about yourself over the next 5 years and the next 20 years. Or like me, you happen to run companies and you're worried about what this means for your employees. We're going to take the time to understand how to focus on human potential and what's in store for us as I slowly develop a little tickle in my throat. One thing none of AIs have to worry about, but they do have to worry about someone accidentally hitting the power switch. So I guess having a little cough is not nearly as bad. So let's start with this very, in some ways, straightforward idea. And this idea that I'm going to call well-posed and ill-posed questions. Well-posed. A well-posed question is a question that has a right answer. It's what most tests in school are about. What's 2 plus 2 equal? Well, it doesn't equal 5, and it doesn't equal applesauce. It equals 4, at least if we're talking about a Euclidean system. What was the Treaty of Versailles, or the first one, about? When was it signed? What is the locus ceruleus, and what does it do? These are all questions that have correct answers. Maybe some answers could be more correct than others, but essentially, I can write down that question on a piece of paper and leave a little blank space and give it to my students. And depending on what they write in that blank space, I'll either give them credit for knowing the answer or not. Well-posed questions are easy to implement in a school system. There's a reason that they have been the backbone of education since general universal education became a norm late in the Industrial Revolution. It has helped build much of the world we live in, largely for good, I genuinely believe, though there are some aspects that are less good. But unfortunately, we now live in a world where something is better at well-posed questions than we are. By their very nature, artificial intelligence is trained to answer well-posed questions. If I need to train up a system, a deep neural network, to tell the difference between a real and a fake smile, which was my undergraduate honors thesis, oh, so long ago, I'd rather not talk about it. But the actual work was so much fun that as a relative kid, I could write a bunch of code, implement math on a computer that I understood. And then by showing it a series of pictures, each one a question, is this person smiling? And if so, is it a real smile? A Duchenne or a non-Duchenne smile, as we nerds would call it. I'd also give it eventually the right answer. So I'd ask it the question, it would produce an answer, effectively a yes or no, in its case, something between a 0 and a 1. And depending on whether it was actual answer was yes or no, we could tweak all of the connections, all of the weights, as we call them, between the neurons, so that over time, it got more and more accurate. Every time I presented a face, it was more likely to accurately know whether they were truly smiling or not. By the way, it's all in the eyes. Humans intellectually tend to focus on the mouth, but it's actually contractions of the supraorbital muscles that tell the real story about a real smile. Or perhaps we want to do something different. We want to build a modern large language model like GPT. So we take all of the text from the internet, and in this case, all the social media data and all of the books we can find and all of the emails that have been sent. You probably didn't know that those got shared with a bunch of big companies, but they did. I hope you don't mind, but it's too late now. And we're going to ask our well-posed question in a very simple way. Given a series of words that have occurred, predict the next word in the system. And we have all the right answers because it's all of the text from the internet and beyond. And so GPT, which is the world's biggest autocomplete, astonishingly powerful and immensely useful tool, but in the end, it is answering a well-posed question. There's a right answer after a series of words have occurred. This is the hour of hour. We would expect discontent to come up next. And if it doesn't, then we're going to give it the correct answer so it can update its weights. AI is fundamentally about answering well-posed questions. And it is that way because that's how it's trained. But it's not just important to understand that that is what it is fundamentally trained to do. It is important to understand how well it does it. In a recent paper in which researchers compared the performance, not just of the cutting edge of large language models, they compared the performance even of open source models available for free on the internet, if you have the wherewithal to download the code and implement it on your own computer, against human lawyers in the job of reading contracts. What they found was that GPT and Gemini and Claude and even these open source models did just as well, not just as well as the very best lawyers, but bluntly, none of us are hiring the very best lawyers to read our contracts. In fact, even if we're hiring the firms of the very best lawyers, it is their junior lawyers and paralegals that are actually doing the contract reading. So if we compare the LLMs to those junior lawyers, turns out even that open source model, the model you can get for free online, does just as well as the human beings. Well, just as well isn't too bad. I mean, these are AIs and our humans, paralegals, junior lawyers are doing just as well. The problem is the humans took up to 90 minutes or more to read each contract. The large language models took 5 seconds. And when you work out the full economics of that difference, the LLMs perform just as well as the human beings at 99.97% lower cost. That is not a good story for humanity. Not if our education system is still entirely about answering well-posed questions. Not if we send generations of kids into the classroom to memorize sets of facts that they will never memorize better than a machine. And in fact, what's interesting to note is that those same models that outperformed those lawyers that can pass, at least some of the better ones, can pass every state bar exam in the United States. They can also pass almost every medical licensing board exam in the United States. They can get between 80 and 99th percentile accuracy on the US graduate entrance exam to go to graduate school. The thing I was so proud of having done so well on is now free to everyone in your pocket. All the world's knowledge right here. There is no skill that is robot proof. Oh, yes, I will reiterate, the best lawyers, the best doctors, scientists, engineers, software developers can outperform at least the current generations of large language models. But one, it's not clear how much longer that will last, not when it comes to well-posed questions. And two, there are very few such people in the world. Most of us are very good at our jobs, but we're not the best. We're the people that only did as well as the AI. And that AI performs equitably to the professionals in every field. They don't just know your job, they know everybody's job. At least if we are only thinking of jobs in terms of the answers to well-posed questions. And I hope I've at least begun to explain why we can't. So what is the complement? What is this other thing, an ill-posed question? Well, to be blunt about it, ill-posed questions don't have right answers. We often don't even know what the question is. Ill-posed questions are exploring the unknown. And obviously, by definition, I can't train an AI to solve ill-posed questions. I don't have the right answers with which to train it. That doesn't mean that the cutting edge of deep neural networks and reinforcement learning models and large language models won't be able to play a role in solving those questions. But it does mean if you simply open up GPT and you ask it to do something fundamentally novel and creative, well, at the very least, we can say it hasn't been trained on how to do it because we haven't figured out how to train that kind of intelligence into it. What does that mean for us? What is the implication of all of this? Well, let me start with another idea, an idea that Sam Altman, the co-founder and CEO of OpenAI, pitched at Congress, the US Congress. He was invited before it, and he got in front of them and said boldly, let's imagine a world in which every child has their own AI tutor. GPT, or maybe Gemini, or Claude, or any of these models available to every child to take them through their life and train them. We actually know that tutors make a profound impact on people's lives if they're available. For understandable reasons, highly trained human tutors are awfully hard to come by. But when they're available, I will say, in fact, I literally just read today a job market paper from a Harvard economics student that found that even a tutor of moderate talent, not themselves a genius, but when made available to a student of exceptional potential, dramatically changes their life outcomes. In fact, on average, across all math students, a moderately qualified math tutor engaging in some basic training techniques can improve their lifetime earnings by nearly 20%. And the real finding in the paper was, in fact, that for those elite students who don't have the opportunity, they aren't part of some fancy private school in the American sense that gives them affordances of having these amazing teachers and opportunities. What this student at Harvard found was that the vast majority of math geniuses in the world never get recognized and discovered, and in essence, never become math geniuses. And if they just had these moderately skilled tutors, they would have been found. Their lives would have been changed, and then they would go on to change the lives of the rest of us. So, Sam Altman, yes, I can definitely imagine a world, or at least an almost science fictional world, in which every kid has a tutor, maybe an AI tutor, and it changes the trajectory of their lives. But Sam, you know what I don't have to know? I don't have to imagine. What happens if that tutor is an AI? In fact, the most disturbing thing about Sam Altman's testimony before Congress is that the man who has become the face of artificial intelligence, a man that, to the best of my knowledge, has never built an AI model in his life, doesn't know that AI tutors in education have been studied for decades and decades. And I can summarize the research with the following simple statement. If an AI tutor ever gives students the answers, they never learn anything. I can speak to one experiment in particular in which students were either in a control group that had no AI at all, in a group that had access to an earlier version of an AI. This is before LLMs, but I can attest that the new research has shown that this is true of LLMs as well. And the LLM would just help them. Whatever they asked for, it would help. Then another version of the AI tutor that would work with these students, but it would force them to come up with answers for themselves first before it would help them and give them the answer, confirming whether they were right or wrong. And then there was a final condition in which the AIs never give the answer. But that can't possibly help, right? Because you surely haven't figured out how obvious my little story is going to be here. How could a tutor that never gives answers, a tutor that has less information available to the students, how could it be better? And yet, of course, inevitably, that's exactly the case. The students that were in the AI, that had access to AI tutors that gave them answers, ever, whether it gave them answers right away or made them come up with answers first, they performed worse than the students that never had an AI, but they thought they would do better. Only the AI tutors that never gave answers, they only gave context. They were Socrates, asking questions when students wanted answers. They were jerks. The students hated them. They felt like they learned less, but actually they learned more. And Sam doesn't seem to know this. Well, that alone is interesting. And it does point to some work I'm currently involved in with my wife, who's at the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching, where we're actively working on building some new ideas in AI tutors. I'll come back to that at the end. But it's also incredibly interesting in the context of what we've seen in terms of AIs and worker productivity. There have been a number of papers, and they keep coming out, that essentially show the same thing again and again and again, with relatively low-skill call center workers, with higher skill programmers, with university-educated writers, with elite world-class consultants at BCG, and many, many others as well. In each of these contexts, when given access to an AI, two truly important things emerged. First, the workers perform better. On average, some cases ranging from 15% productivity increases to 40%. More calls logged by call center workers with fewer complaints to managers. More better writing getting done, fewer errors in code, more accurate analyses being run by consultants, and their bosses judge the reports and the presentations they gave as superior to those who didn't have AI. All right, I said there were two findings, but actually the one I just gave you isn't my first one. Or rather, it's my first one only in context, which is the overwhelming beneficiaries were individuals who were lower skill and early in their career. So all of that I just said about better call center work, better coding, better writing, better analysis, it was almost all from younger employees that were less experienced and those employees who had already started off significantly worse performing than their peers. The people with a lot of experience and skill didn't actually see a lot of benefit. By the way, that's not the end of that story. I'm going to come back to that at the end as well. So that's finding number one. And I think that's an incredibly important finding. If you think about what I just said about AI tutors, when students are learning and an AI gives them the answer, they stop learning and they never get better in their courses. What do you think happens to a junior employee, less experienced and less skills, when an AI is giving them the answer? I predict a whole generation of workers that never really learn how to do their jobs. And that truly concerns me. So that's finding number one. Finding number two comes only from the paper on those BCG consultants. And it's an incredibly important one, because everything I just told you is about routine work. In other words, it's about well-posed questions. And in that sense, we shouldn't be surprised that workers making use of AIs are better able to answer well-posed questions. That's the very nature of modern AI. But in that final paper on the BCG consultant, they took it a step further. After asking these consultants to analyze spreadsheets of data using an AI, and then preparing a report and a presentation to give to their bosses, they then had one more question. Given your analysis, what should this hypothetical client do? That's where the question went from well-posed to ill-posed. There wasn't an absolute right answer. And in fact, by design and trickery of the people who put the experiment together, if you simply did the first obvious thing, because of course the people who put the experiment together had access to the exact same AIs, so they figured out what the AI would say and then designed the experiment to not match that. So what did these people do? Well, when the ones who were using AI ended up performing worse on the creative task, the ill-posed task, than those who had no AI whatsoever. So in other words, there is this part of education and work that I'm going to argue is still fundamentally human. A part of this process, an ill-posed, uncertain, exploratory part, a fundamentally creative part of work, which is still predominantly a human task. And we need to completely rethink how we're educating our kids, how we're preparing our workforce, how we are thinking about preparing ourselves to have an impact on the world, to understand that the world doesn't need us to give esoteric answers to arcane questions. Those are free in our pocket. What it needs us to do is to explain why. It's to go out into the darkness, into the unknown, and act without certainty. That remains a fundamentally human task, and paper after paper, still to this day, has found that in creative tasks, AIs like GPT, and Claude and Gemini, powerful as they are, dramatically sophisticated tools, maybe the most sophisticated man has ever invented, still cannot, on their own, transform and explore the unknown. That is ours. In fact, I would put it this way, that while the AI in my pocket knows everything, it understands nothing. And that difference, while seemingly subtle, is profound. Some people have said that AI isn't really intelligent. Well, I happen to have some very fancy, smancy degrees, and I would take issue with that, because if it's not intelligent, if GPT is not intelligent, then in an important way, neither are we. What GPT has is something we might call statistical intelligence, or in psychology, we might call it model-free learning. The ability to just absorb massive sets of patterns in the world and to learn the visual structure, the auditory structure of the world, to learn how to do things with our body, to even learn how to speak. The reason LLMs seem so truly intelligent like we are is because they are in that one way. And in fact, so much of what we say is purely statistical learned and what we would call stereotyped. The next word in the pattern that I'm producing, I'm not really thinking about it all that hard. I may say something a little bit different than the rest of you. I certainly, I guess, am saying it with a California accent, but even that is statistical learning. Only rarely do I really come out and say something unusual and unexpected, in a sense, even to me. So we share that. AI and human intelligence share statistical learning, but it is so much better at it than we are. So let's stop fighting against the thing we are no longer the best at. In fact, maybe we never were. In many cases, chimpanzees and rats are better statistical learners than human beings. So let's just release that idea that we will know more facts, that we will be better at doing routine skills than the machines that we build. What we can do that to date no other thing on the planet can is this incredibly crucial ability to explore the unknown. And we don't do it because we know how to factorize a polynomial. It's not about whether we know the facts of history or of literature. What it turns out it's about is much more whether we are resilient. It is about our tolerance for uncertainty, about our analogical reasoning and our perspective taking skills. It's a very different way of thinking about building a human being than thinking of it purely in terms of a set of well-posed questions and their answers. We need a very different take on our education system and where we can go from here. So I'm not here to sell you a book, but nonetheless, I've been working on it for a very long time. So let me just say, How to Robot Proof Your Kids will be out next year. And it is my attempt to explain this story in excruciating details, with also a lot of science fiction references and dumb, occasionally filthy jokes, because I just couldn't help myself. But it doesn't only pose these questions. It doesn't only look at the mistakes we've made in preparing for an AI revolution, at least from a human-centered perspective. It also looks at what we do next. So I've been asked to leave a little time for questions, and I'm probably already running a bit long. So let's aim for about maybe 15 minutes. So I'm going to try and tie up here in about 7 minutes what we can do next and where we can take this different world. And then please start thinking about questions. I think maybe you can put them into the chat, and we'll take 15 minutes and I'll chat with you all about everything. Although if you've ever heard me on the BBC, then you'll know I have an astonishing ability to turn a 30-second answer into a 3-hour diatribe. So we'll try our best to get a lot of questions in. So we want to build better people. People that aren't simply human machines, but are uniquely human in their ability to explore the unknown, their ability to answer ill-posed questions. So what does that entail? What does that sort of education system look like? Well, one thing I don't want to do is shy away from the power of AI. I've been working in this field for nearly 30 years. While artificial intelligence has some profound flaws, and there are some profound flaws in our regulation of artificial intelligence. And if you want to ask questions about that, you're welcome to. I wrote an FT piece that makes some rather provocative claims about AI and civil rights and how these relationships need to be changed. But I love what I can do with them. I love the fact that if someone comes to me and tells me they have a dying child, or a company that is struggling to understand the bias in their hiring process, or a country, an entire country that is trying to figure out how to make their education system work, that because I know how to build an artificial intelligence system, and I know a little something about people, that I, all by myself, can begin to explore the depths of the world and sometimes just the life of one little child and make a difference. And we were chatting before, and I know I've shared this story, so some of you have probably heard it, but this includes my own son, who 11 years ago was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And so I hacked all of his medical equipment, violated all sorts of US federal laws, and built the first ever AI for diabetes. An AI which is still being used today and may someday end up saving millions of lives. I got to build the first ever AI that could predict manic episodes in bipolar sufferers and help change the course of their lives. Right now, I have a company here in Copenhagen that is combining neurotechnologies and AI to treat Alzheimer's. And I have another now in San Diego where we have the first ever biological test for postpartum depression. The most common complication in pregnancy, we might now finally be able to diagnose and treat before mothers ever experience a symptom, none of which would be possible without artificial intelligence. But Even when I use it in my day-to-day, I'm thoughtful. I never let it give me the answers, ever. I spoke at the internal event for a very large company about a year ago and was astonished because before my keynote, they were training their senior leadership in how to use GPT. Their number one use case was save time by having it read and summarize your emails for you. Their number two use case was save time by having it write your emails for you. I'm pretty certain we can save a lot of time by just not writing so many terrible emails. If a human being didn't need to write it, it probably didn't need to get written. What an absurd world. This is a scene out of the movie Brazil. It is demented. Never in a million years would I let an AI write a single email for me, not a single social post. And one of my jobs is writing. I mentioned I have a book coming out. I have two more in the works and a screenplay. Just a word to the wise, if you've never written a book before, you should definitely start with 3 books and a screenplay and work on a Netflix deal. That's absolutely 100% the way to do it. You're not getting in over your head, and you will not desperately regret your life decisions, regret them later. Even though I clearly desperately need AIs to write these books for me, to write my screenplays, I hate writing, hate it with a passion. As I've heard actually many other professional writers say, I like having had written, but I don't like writing. And yet, I never let it write for me. In a world where all of the world's information is available for free in your pocket, your unique voice is your value. And I mean that literally. The way you see the world, the way you communicate it to those around you, differently than everyone else, is the thing that makes you valuable. Because the thing we already know and collectively agree on, it's free in your pocket again. So where do we go from here? Well, let me give you an example right out of the work on my upcoming book. I open up Gemini. I have a long history collaborating with Google, so I make use of Gemini. I don't know why, but it's not bad, and it's very good Med Gemini for medical stuff, so I make use of it in that part of my world, so I've decided to use it here as well. Gemini, you are my enemy, my nemesis. For my entire career, you have dogged me, found every mistake in every paper I've ever published, and exposed me to the world. Here is the chapter of my new book, the chapter I painstakingly wrote over the last 2 weeks, the chapter that I never want to have to read again. I never want to have to touch. I don't want to write. Find every mistake I've made, every flaw in my reasoning, every fact I've gotten wrong, and explain to me in detail what was wrong about it. I don't use AIs to make myself and my life easier. I use it to make it harder. I use it to make things harder so that I become better. In our research, we call this productive friction. And much like what I was talking about earlier with those students that hated the AI that never gave them answers, it feels like you know less. Having all of your mistakes pointed out, having them explained to you in detail. But in fact, you learn so much more. You become better. This is what we need. Not AIs writing our emails for us. We need AIs helping to make us better. This is what excites me about modern artificial intelligence, machine learning, and where we're going from here. And you better hope I see it that way, because I just don't build AIs. I build neurotechnologies that go into our head. And one of my core philosophies is I should never build a technology that can do for you what you can already do for yourself. I only want to build systems that will make you better, that will challenge you, that will bring out those things that you truly cannot do for yourself, and then scaffold, augment, and complement everything you already have. This is the future of our education system if we choose to make it so. Unfortunately, this hasn't been the trend, either in workforce or in education. So, like I said, I decided to write a book and be a problem to the White House and to others that would like there to be some simple answers. And there aren't, because the very nature of what we need right now is quite literally hard questions, not simple answers. That's the thing humans can do. And if you need me to end on a bright note, think about this. The body of all of the answers to well-posed questions is massive. It is the size of the internet and beyond. It is an astonishingly large resource. If we added it up in bits, it would be an astronomically large number. But it's finite. The space of all those ill-posed questions, the size of the unknown is infinite. We humans get the infinite. The AIs only get the things we already know. Let's build a generation of explorers and change the world. That's the world I want my kids to grow up in. And I would wish that for your children as well. So I'm going to take a pause here. I'm going to assume there's cheering going on, whooping, adulation, maybe a little laughter, if only in my own head, because my ego can't take it any differently than that. And please, I hope that there are some questions. It would be a lot of fun.